our presentation, we chose the question, what impacts a student's social life? So the purpose of our presentation was to study factors that influence a student's social life. To collect our data, we used an online survey, and we had 26 students answer the survey. So within the survey, we had 4 main questions. Number 1, how would you rate your satisfaction with your social life on a scale from 0 to 10, with 0 being that I have no social life and 10 being I'm very satisfied with my social life? Number 2, how many hours per week on average do you spend in classes? Number 3, how many hours per week on average do you spend on work, if any? And number 4, how many hours per week on average do you spend on any extracurricular activities such as clubs, organizations, community service, athletics, etc.? So with our survey, we plotted out all our responses from our 26 students. So the green represents how would you rate your current social life? The yellow represents how many hours per week do you spend in classes? The blue represents how many hours per week do you work? And then our purple represents how many hours per week on average do you spend on any extracurricular activities? So our first question, student satisfaction with their social life. So here we have a chart and we have it all charted out. So we figured that the mean was 7, our median was 8, our standard deviation was 2.4, and our range was 10. So the mean score of 7 indicates that the average level of satisfaction with social life among the survey students. The median score of 8 represents the middle value in the range of responses, suggesting that there is a relatively balanced distribution of satisfaction ratings. With a standard deviation of 2.4, the responses are somewhat dispersed around the mean, indicating some variability in the student's satisfaction levels compared to the mean. And now with the range being 10, this indicates that the spread between the lowest and the highest satisfaction ratings, suggesting a wide range of social satisfaction among students.
So for our students' class hours per week and social life satisfaction, the mean was 16, the median was 16, standard deviation was 4.9, and range was 18. So the mean of 16 hours per week represents the average number of hours spent in classes by the surveyed students. The median of 16 hours indicates that half of the students spend more than 16 hours in classes per week, while the other half spends less. The standard deviation of 4.9 suggests a moderate amount of variability in the number of hours spent in classes among the students compared to the mean. The range of 18 indicates the difference between the lowest and highest values, representing the extent of variation in hours spent in classes. For students' work hours per week and social life satisfaction, the mean was 9, the median was 18, standard deviation was 9, and range was 30. The mean of 9 hours per week represents the average number of hours spent on work by the surveyed students. The median of 8 hours suggests that half of the students spend more than 8 hours on work per week, while the other half spends less. With a standard deviation of 9, there's a relatively high degree of variability in the number of hours spent on work among the students compared to the mean. The range of 30 indicates a large spread between the lowest and highest values, implying significant variation in hours spent on work. For students' hours of extracurricular activities and social life satisfaction, the mean was 7, the median was 6, the standard deviation was 6.3, and the range was 30. The mean of 7 hours per week represents the average number of hours spent on extracurricular activities by the surveyed students. The median of 6 hours suggests that half of the students spend more than 6 hours on extracurricular activities per week, while the other half spends less. The standard deviation of 6.3 shows that there is a moderate amount of variability in the number of hours spent on extracurricular activities among the students compared to the mean. And the range of 30 indicates a large spread between the lowest and highest values, indicating significant variation in hours spent on extracurricular activities.
So this is some findings of our data analysis. For the first question of social life satisfaction, the survey students reported a mean satisfaction rating of 7 out of 10 for their social life. This indicates a relatively positive overall satisfaction level among the participants. The second question that we asked was about the class hours per week. The data show that students spend an average of 16 hours per week attending classes. This information alone does not directly indicate a relationship with social life satisfaction, but it provides the context regarding the time students allocate to their academic commitments. The third question was about the work hours per week. So, on average, students reported spending approximately 9 hours per week on work. The range of 30 hours indicates significant variation in the amount of time students dedicate to work. This suggests that work commitments may potentially impact social life satisfaction, as students with more extensive work might have less time available for social interactions. The last question was about extracurricular activities per week. The data reveals that students spend an average of 7 hours per week on extracurricular activities. This includes participation in clubs, organizations, community service, athletics, and other activities. The range of 30 hours again indicates a wide variation in the involvement of students in these activities. This suggests that engagement in such activities may play a role in shaping social life satisfaction, as those with more active involvement may have more opportunity for social interaction and fulfillment. All right, so this is a quick recap of our statistics before we come to the next part where we analyze our data according to groups. So, in order to do this, the first step, we combine all the participants into three groups of satisfaction rating. Those who rated 6 and below are considered low satisfaction group. 7 and 8, they are moderate satisfaction. And 9 and 10, they are high satisfaction. The second step, we calculated the mean hours each group spent for each activity. And last step, we illustrated all of them on the column chart and see if there's any trend. Now let's have a look at our chart. You can see that the three green columns represent the mean hours spent in class by the three groups. As you can see, these hours are nearly the same, ranging from 15 to 18 hours per week. Next, the three blue columns represent the mean hours spent at work by the three groups. The trend that can be seen here is the less hours spent on work, the higher satisfaction. Last but not least, the yellow columns are the mean hours spent for extracurricular activities. These columns get taller with the increased rating of satisfaction. So this means the more hours spent on extracurricular activities, the higher social life satisfaction.
Okay, up next, we then took all the data that we had acquired and we broke them up into different categories. So we put into different categories our 0 to 6, 7 to 8, and 9 to 10 social life satisfaction. And then we divided those into different categories of the questions that we had. So how many hours do you spend in class per week? How much do you work? And how much time do you spend in extracurricular activities? And then we did a lot more analysis based on those. And so here is a graph representing the breakdown based on social life satisfaction and the amount of time spent in class per week. And then over here on the right, we can see the different data points actually in physical form. And so our analysis here is that we saw really no correlation with the number of hours spent in class per week with the social life satisfaction. We saw a lot of those who had a lower social life, so less than 6, they kind of had in the middle range a mean of around that 15, 16 area, whereas 9 and 10 kind of had a little bit higher, so maybe around 18 or 17, 18 range there. And then the 7 to 8, they were lower at 15, an average mean of that. And so we didn't really see a correlation relating to the social life satisfaction with those. And so we saw that the standard deviation of these were around 5. So our data is moderately dispersed among the mean. So this can mean that it is biased with outliers. But we did see that there was a lower mean of the number of hours spent in class in the category of 7 8 compared to those that were less than 6 or less than equal to 6 or greater than or equal to 9. The next one we did was how many hours per week working, and as we can see here, we did see a little bit of a correlation with the mean in a sense. So we saw here that there was a correlation with the number of hours per week worked and the satisfaction of their social life. So those who had a higher social life satisfaction, so greater than or equal to 9, had a lot less hours worked than those who had a rated their social life a 0 to 6. They had a lot more hours worked. And so the difference between those two means was around 5 hours per week. So on average, those who had a higher social life satisfaction had worked 5 hours less than those who had a lower satisfaction on social life. Again, the standard deviation was high on these, so they were around 8. So these were highly dispersed among the means compared to the mean, and it can be related to outliers based on that. This is an expected trend because we see that if you do spend less time at work, you more than likely have more time to spend with friends, spend with family, have a better social life in essence. And then how many hours per week in extracurricular activities was our next one. We did see another correlation with here, with our graph here. We saw that the more that they spent in extracurricular activities, the more or the higher social life satisfaction that they had, whereas the lower they spent in these extracurricular activities like clubs, sports, volunteering work, things like that, they had a lower social life satisfaction. And on average, they spent about 6 hours more in that 9 to 10 group compared to that less than or equal to 6 social life satisfaction. We did have some standard deviations less than 5, so that means it's not as dispersed as the other graphs were. So we can kind of say that this is a little bit more accurate data based on that. But also anything less or greater than 2 would be kind of moderately for a standard deviation. And then this trend would make sense because, extracurriculars are kind of considered a social aspect. You're socializing a lot with friends, going out in the community, things like that, and you are socializing, and it's more of a pleasurable activity than work is. So it is expected to have a higher social life when doing more extracurricular activities. And our conclusion is that those who work more had a lower social life satisfaction than those who didn't work. So working less and spending more time in extracurricular activities like sports, clubs, different things like that would make you have a higher social life. We didn't see any correlation with the number of classes worked, which is kind of expected. But these extracurricular activities, the trends that we did see with extracurricular activities and work are expected, since we do see that the extracurriculars are kind of a I get to do more on a voluntary base, whereas work is I have to do. It can be kind of dreaded type of thing, so it can be seen as not as a social aspect. Rather, extracurriculars are really seen as extra or seen as social. So I want to thank you for listening.